The cry was smaller than the rain. At the South Boston, Massachusetts docks, a German Shepherd puppy, barely 2 months old, worried a cracked water bottle cap like it was food. Noon light pressed through a sheet of drizzle, turning the asphalt into a bright mirror that made his ribs look whiter than they should. He shivered so hard his ears tried to hide inside themselves. I knelt on the wet concrete and let rain collect in my palm so he could drink without stepping closer. He lapped the puddle in my hand, stopping only to breathe like it hurt to choose between air and water. I tore a protein bar in half, warmed it with my breath, and rubbed the crumbs soft between my fingers. He didn't plead or bark. He watched, unblinking, as if the storm might take me too. I'm Harlan Pike, 44, and a badge never taught me how to hold a life that fits in one hand. I slid my patrol jacket under him, the fabric steaming slightly where warm sun hit wet fur. The moment his ribs met heat, he unclenched, a tiny ragged sigh that made the gulls fall quiet. I called the day clinic, booked solid until evening. The city shelters were at capacity, intake paused until further notice, the recording said like weather. I pressed my phone to my shoulder and my other hand to his heartbeat, counting each thrum as evidence I could keep. He finished the crumbs and tucked his chin into the pocket of my palm as if the hand belonged to him first. I told myself, language could wait and warmth could not. It wasn't adoption. It wasn't forever. Just a stop between storms, a clean towel, a bowl, a breath. I lifted the rescued puppy and he folded into the jacket like a lowercase letter learning its name. I told myself it was just for the night. Our house didn't speak anymore. The brave pup stepped over the threshold and the air forgot how to move. Grandma whispered hello like a prayer you don't want to wake, and the boy only watched from the hallway in his socks. The pup sniffed the hem of his pajama top and retreated 2 small steps, as if respect were heavier than fear. Wet paw prints dotted the entry rug like commas, pausing the room between thoughts. I set a warm bowl of water down where the light made a soft square on the floor. He lowered his face and drank in careful sips, jaw clicking lightly, breath fogging the rim. I rubbed him with an old towel, slow circles, watching his ears fold back then rise, testing the temperature of the house. The heater ticked to life and he flinched, then settled, ribs fluttering under a coat that hadn't learned comfort yet. He looked at the boy, then the doorway, then the boy again, as if the map of safety was still drawing itself. I sat on the tile and let my hand rest palm up where he could ignore it without penalty. He inched forward, smelled the salt there, and leaned away again, a decision unfinished but not abandoned. Grandma moved like weather in a quiet field, setting a second towel by the baseboard and stepping back into her hush. I told the silence it could stay, but it would have to make room for breath. The loyal puppy carried his nose toward the hallway and stopped at the edge like a swimmer testing cold water with one toe. He lowered to his elbows first, then his chest, then the long sigh of a creature who chooses a post without being told. The ball from the living room rolled a little on its own and stopped near his paw, as if gravity had switched sides. The boy didn't reach for it, but his gaze held, and the pup's tail made a small, private answer against the floor. I could hear him counting the space between us in inhales, measuring whether our house was gentle. I slid the water a fraction closer, and he noticed but didn't move, an agreement written in breath. 2 minutes stretched like thread and didn't break. He lowered his head to the threshold and blinked once, twice, slow as a porch light coming on in daytime. He fell asleep, pressed to the threshold like he was guarding silence. He didn't fight the stethoscope. Morning pushed a thin light through the clinic blinds, and he lay still on the metal table, ears tilted back but not pleading. The bell touched his chest, and his heartbeat tripped like a small bird learning the sky. He breathed in short measures, counting the room with every rise. The thermometer beeped, and he did not complain, just stared at the sink as if water could promise a future. The scanner hummed along his neck and shoulder and found no chip, only skin too loose for his bones. The tech lifted his lip and winced at the pale gums of dehydration. Fleas freckled the edges where fur thinned, and there were scratches a day old and older. They logged him as a rescued puppy and started a treatment plan without ceremony. A tiny needle made a knot of skin and then a sigh, the kind that tells you pain is losing. The vet marked out vaccines on a chart, dots of days with a pen that didn't shake. I held him lightly at the chest and felt how little it took to be anchor and shore at the same time. In the washroom, they worked a medicated foam into a gentle lather and his eyes half closed, not in sleep but in relief. Warm water ran clean, then pink, then clear again, and the towel made a looping hush around him. The loyal puppy tucked his chin under my wrist while the tech trimmed a cracked nail as carefully as a promise. He didn't whine, only breathed slow through his nose and watched my face to be sure the world stayed steady. The vet said the smallest ones have a harder climb without a mother, and then looked at him like an exception. "These eyes hold on," she said, and the room agreed without words. They sent us out with a schedule, a card, and a brown bag that rustled like hope when I moved. He weighed less than it felt like a life should weigh, and still he leaned into my ribs as if houses could start there. At the desk I signed where they pointed and pocketed the receipt like proof that a morning can change your fate. The vet called him a survivor. I called him home. He chose the smallest toy. He nosed into the old cardboard box by the couch, fished out a soft fabric ball, and carried it with the serious mouth of something learning ceremony. At the doorway to the boys' room, he stopped. He did not cross the line of wood where carpet met hall, just sat and waited, paws close, back straight, breath steadying the space. The timid pup placed the ball down, looked at the boy, and then at the floor, like he was asking for permission in a language with no verbs. The boy didn't lift his hands. His eyes did the moving instead, following the circle of yarn, then the rise and fall of the small chest on the threshold. I could hear the air change, those tiny clicks between inhale and swallow that mean attention has replaced fear. The pup nudged the ball once with his nose and retreated a half step, offering distance like a gift. He tilted an ear, then the other, and held still until stillness didn't scare him anymore. I kept my voice in my pocket and let the room speak in breathing. Grandma stood behind the kitchen arch, not stirring the tea, not breaking the frame. Sunlight cut across the hall and made a pale square on his shoulder. He blinked into it and didn't flinch. He tried again, gentler. He rolled the ball closer with a paw and sat back down, as if patience could grow legs and sit beside him. The gentle puppy yawned tight and quiet, the kind that shakes the whiskers and nothing else. The boy's sock curled under his toes and then flattened, a slow tide. One finger lifted from his side as if testing weather. The pup saw the finger and didn't chase it with his eyes. He stared at the ball instead, respecting the rule he'd written for himself. I could count his choices in ribs and tail, the way calm overruled hunger, the way waiting became the action. A minute passed, then a second minute, both intact. When the finger fell back, the pup lowered his head until his nose touched the seam of carpet and wood, and he stayed. No whine, no hurry. Only that straight line of looking that said he understood the distance belonged to trust and not to walls. He learned our house like a whisper. He mapped the floorboards by heartbeats. He learned which plank squeaked under my second step and which corner kept the cold like a pocket. All night he slept by the boy's door, nose to the seam, waking when the house sighed and settling when it remembered how. Before sunrise, he stood, stretched in 3 careful pieces, and nosed the soft ball a few inches closer to the room. He sat again as if moving hope by centimeters was a job, not a wish. The brave pup listened for the small sounds that meant the boy was awake, then kept still so those sounds wouldn't run away. When the door hinge clicked, he didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the ball and breathed like counting was a kind of language. I made breakfast slow so the minutes would have somewhere to sit. Grandma watched from the hall mirror where she hides her prayers and her hairpins. Light laid a narrow stripe across his back and he let it stay, choosing not to chase it. She noticed before I did that the child was listening to the soft snuffle at the threshold, not to me buttering toast. She set an empty cup near the boy's ankle and stepped back so the kitchen wouldn't crowd him. He reached for the cup, and the pup eased forward to drink from the bowl beside it, water ticking quietly against the rim. The loyal dog blinked once, twice, and retreated to his post like a guard who knows the difference between a door and a wall. A small hand slid along the carpet and touched the ball. Contact. Then the flinch, the pullback, the breath that breaks and repairs itself in the same second. He didn't follow. He didn't ask. He rested his chin on the floor and let the space between them hold steady, as if trust grows best when no one tugs. Grandma folded the towel without looking down, the way you fold a map you plan to use again. I could hear nothing but the careful click of noses and the soft stitching of air. The ball stopped at the line where voice should have been. A nose touched a knuckle. He was on the second stair, crouched as if the wood might forget him. The pup approached along the baseboard, a slow tide without waves. At one step away, he paused and let his breath count to 3. Then the nose came forward, a careful hello, and rested against the boy's right hand. No scramble, no spark of teeth, only a stillness that felt made, not found. The brave pup kept his tail quiet, as if sound could break what had arrived. The stair creaked, and he didn't startle. The boy turned his hand over, patient as weather, and let 2 fingers land on a velvet ear. He did not speak. His fingertips pressed, then softened, reading the warmth like braille. The ear folded under the touch and then rose again, listening to the smallest room we own. The loyal puppy leaned just enough to say, "I'm here," not enough to ask for more. I sat on the bottom step and forgot to breathe, and when air returned, it tasted like dust and rain. Grandma didn't move in the kitchen doorway. The ball waited at the threshold like a witness. 1 second stretched and asked for another, so he gave it. The pup lowered to a sit, nose still on skin, eyes steady, ribs quieting. I thought of report forms and forms for grief and how none of them teach this. The boy slid his hand to the pup's cheek and back to the ear, building a route the heart could remember. I didn't count the beats this time. I let them keep themselves. The world outside kept its schedule and we unlearned ours. No command, no cue, no word to ring a bell. Just 2 bodies agreeing that touch could be a kind of light. He stayed there, like a promise. He learned our grief by scent. He nosed the living room box again and came up with a faded cloth animal, its seam hands stitched and loose. He carried it to the bedroom doorway, laid it down, and stepped back until his paws found the hallway's shadow. He didn't look at us. He watched the toy, as if the toy were the bridge and he was the toll. The boy measured the distance like a math problem he remembered but couldn't yet speak. One hand drifted forward and hovered over the cloth, then landed and held. No words, no nod, just fingers closing a fraction tighter than yesterday. The gentle pup eased his weight backward and sat, tail still, eyes soft, offering time instead of instructions. I kept my hands quiet on my knees and let breath choose the speed of the room. Grandma blinked hard and pretended she needed the light switch. We added a small mat by the door so he would have a place that said his name without saying it. He tested the edges, turned twice, and settled like a comma that makes a sentence honest. The house began to remember itself, the washer bearings clicking like distant crickets, the kettle giving one polite cough before the boil. In that soundscape, the faithful dog learned our schedule without clocks, rising when the curtains brightened, pausing when the boy stood still. In the mornings, he nudged the soft ball closer by inches, then left it and returned to the mat, patient enough to be furniture. The boy kept the old toy a heartbeat longer each time and set it down as if placing a flag in new soil. When he stepped past, he didn't follow, only watched through the doorway the way a lighthouse watches water. I caught myself breathing in sync with his small ribs, borrowing steadiness I couldn't find anywhere else. Outside, the radio promised ordinary weather and the sky agreed, but the week kept its secrets. Storms were forecast for Thursday. The wind took the latch. The porch door bucked once, then flung a breath of cold across the hall like a warning that arrived too late. Thunder laid a hand on the roof, and the pup startled hard, legs untangling into motion before thought could catch them. He slipped through the narrow gap, nails skating on wet boards, shoulder brushing the rail, momentum making the choice his courage wouldn't. Rain hit him sideways and flattened his ears to a slick triangle. Grass turned to glass under his paws, and he windmilled to stay up, then ran because running felt like the only dry thing left. The yard smelled wrong, all metal and lightning, none of the warm towel or the boy's cotton pajamas from the doorway. He stopped and sniffed for the rubber memory of the ball and found only gutters and iron and fear. He tried the fence line, muzzle low, tail thin as wire, collecting clues the storm kept erasing. A clap split the sky and he tucked into himself, then darted toward the alley where the air tasted like yesterday's trash and rain pennies. He looked like a stray puppy in a city that didn't slow for anything. Headlights smeared the street into a river, and his reflection ran with him. He slid onto the slick asphalt and scrambled to the curb, belly wet, toes splayed, breath stitching short and tight. He ducked behind the bin, then out again, chasing the ghost of a scent that kept dying at the corner. I called for him, but I had no name to give, just the shape of comfort shouted into weather that wouldn't carry it. The lost puppy raised his face and blinked at the spray, trying to pin the house in his nose like a compass. Somewhere a gate clanged twice and went quiet. He chose the sound like a path and followed it until the city smelled only of distance. I hit the porch light, and it meant nothing to the rain. I ran for the yard, and the yard gave me back water and noise. I ran for the fence, and the alley met me with moving shadows. I ran out into the rain, but the house was the one holding its breath. We lost more than a dog that night. We called into the storm, and it gave us back silence. The porch light threw a weak square onto the rain, and it tore the square to ribbons. Grandma stood behind me with one hand at her throat and the other on the doorframe. The alley answered with metal and runoff, and not a single paw. I said, "Come on, buddy," and the weather kept the words like change in its pocket. Then the boy stepped into the doorway in his socks and opened his mouth for the first time in 2 months. "Rook," he whispered, so small the thunder flinched. The name struck the dark like a match, quick and bright and impossible to put back. Out beyond the trash bins, a shape stopped moving. 2 ears turned toward the house and held, as if the syllable had a leash on it. He tested the air the way you test ice with 1 foot. Then he ran, not brave, not fast, just certain, stitching puddles into a path. He hit the bottom steps, slipped, and scrambled, claws skittering, heart louder than the rain. The German Shepherd puppy pitched onto the porch and folded himself into the boy, as if homes could be found by sound. Water flung off his coat, and the child didn't care. He anchored both hands in wet fur and didn't let go. The loyal puppy trembled once, and then went still, the kind of still that says stay and means it. I felt the house take a breath it had been saving for weeks. Grandma cried without sound and pressed her palm to the glass like a benediction. I knelt and touched his shoulder, and he leaned harder into the small chest that had called him back. Lightning rolled away as if it had used up its voice and needed ours instead. He answered to a name we didn't know we were waiting for. The house remembered how to breathe. We wrapped him in towels by the fireplace and let the flames teach the room a slower clock. Steam lifted from his coat in small veils, and the smell of rain turned into wool and ash and safety. Grandma warmed milk on the stove and poured it into a shallow cup so his whiskers wouldn't drown. He lapped without hurry, pausing to blink at the quiet like he was checking if it would stay. The boy knelt on the rug and flattened his hands on his knees the way you do when you're almost brave. He opened his mouth, and the word came out like a stitched whisper. Stay. Rook looked up, measured the air, and settled without moving a paw. No command voice. No hand signal. Just a boy finding a second word and a body that chose to answer. The rescued puppy leaned his shoulder into the child and let the weight announce belonging. Grandma cried the way a kettle does when you lift it too soon. I folded a fresh towel and slid it under his chest, and he sighed as if the floor had learned manners. Outside, the storm practiced leaving. Inside, breath got simple. That night, he didn't return to the threshold. He circled once beside the bed and lay down with his spine to the open room, a guard who trusts the door. The boy climbed under the blanket and let one hand rest on Rook's side like a note you don't want to lose. They matched each other's rhythm without rehearsal. Rise for rise, hush for hush. I sat in the hall and listened to the small clicks of claws against dream. The loyal dog twitched once, chasing something gentle, and then stilled when the hand found him again. Grandma turned off the last light and the dark behaved. The house kept breathing and no one reminded it how. Morning has a way of proving what night promises. Heat from the vents made a low river across the floor, and he followed it to the kitchen like a map. I set down a clean mat where sunlight pooled and didn't say a word. In the morning, there were 3 bowls on the mat. Paperwork is just a word for what hearts already decided. At City Hall, the clerk stamped 3 times and slid the forms across with a pen. He asked if I was sure, and I nodded like the answer had been living in our house for weeks. He typed Rook into the registry, and the tag machine rattled a silver circle warm from friction. I clipped it to the new collar, and it chimed in a small ring that sounded like safety. On the form, the box for rescue dog didn't feel like a category. It felt like a direction. The loyal puppy sat square at my boot and met the camera like he knew this was the photograph that starts a family. A minute later, his picture joined the fridge. A hand, a paw, a ball, his name. At dinner, the boy cleared his throat and found words like steps across a creek. He told Grandma 2 sentences, careful and bright. Rook caught the ball. He gave it back. Grandma covered her mouth and laughed into her palm and then cried into the laugh. Rook leaned his shoulder into the boy and blinked as if applause carried weight. Back home, he carried the softball to the hall and then the little pajama shirt to the hamper. Later, he found a sock and delivered it to the front door like a letter with no stamp. The dishwasher clicked, the washer hummed, the kettle sighed, and the house put its noises back on. Floorboards made old music, and his tags answered with a bright metronome. At night, he checked the rooms and came back to the bed without counting, choosing sleep where the hand was. We were not fixed, not yet, but the road was drawn under our feet. He didn't rescue us all at once. Some rescues sound like rain. Tonight, it is only breathing. Rook sleeps on his side, paw over the soft ball like he's keeping a promise. The tag at his collar rests against the rug and winks when the lamp thinks about dimming. The boy sits beside him and reads half voice, the way you read to someone who already knows the ending. Every few lines he pauses and puts a hand on warm fur to make sure the story is staying. The house is slow now, not silent. Air moves without asking permission. Floorboards answer with old music, and his collar makes one bright note in the chorus. The window holds the night without leaking a single memory we can't carry. He gave the rooms air. He gave the boy a word, then another, then the space to use them. He gave our grief a shape we could hold and set down when our arms got tired. He is a rescued puppy, but some days, I swear, he rescued the map we live by. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. If this story reached you, help it reach the next family waiting for a heartbeat like his. Share it, save it, send it to the friend who thinks one voice can't change a house. When you share a story like this, you put food in a bowl we haven't filled yet, and light a porch we haven't built. Thank you for staying with us, brave Paws. Thank you for every minute you lend to hope. He made our house breathe and gave it something to say. The loyal puppy sleeps and the boy reads on, and I listen to both like prayer. He didn't fix everything, but he made everything worth fixing. When I turn out the light, the tag and the ball remain, the small proof of a life that chose us. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.